All right, this right here is a list containing the recipe for my dream landscape photography lens. I've been a photographer for about 15 years and for the past decade focused almost solely on landscape photography. Many good things have happened since I started out, but one thing stays the same. As landscape photographers, we're constantly chasing that perfect balance between the ultra-wide angle perspective, sharpness, and practicality. But I feel I just constantly have to compromise. But what if there was a lens that actually broke free of those limitations? Today, I will lay out the blueprint for a lens that ought to exist. And I'm calling out the giants of the industry to make it happen. And no, I'm not asking for something completely impossible like a 12 to 600 millimeter f1.2. That thing would be the size of the Hubble telescope if someone actually decided to make it. So no, thank you. No, I just want something that is really practical, but also of very high quality. And the lens I have in mind actually does not exist yet. There are some very close to it, but not entirely. And this specific lens would be really good for landscape photographers, cityscape photographers, probably also architecture photographers. Now, I'm of course not a lens engineer, but I do think it ought to be possible. So this is an open challenge to all the lens manufacturers, and I promise you, if you manage to create this lens, I will be the first to buy it and promote the beep out of it. So here it comes, and hear me out before you're like, what is that? A 14 to 40 millimeter full frame lens, or 13 to 35. It got a rhyme, right? Now I'm specifically looking for this lens for a Sony full frame system. So I am looking at you, Sony, Tamron, Sigma. But this Wishlist is brand independent. So no matter your brand, it ought to be the most practical landscape photography lens in existence. So why am I calling for what would probably be defined as a wide angle super zoom lens? Well, basically because it would work perfectly with other super zoom lenses like the Tamron 28 to 200 millimeter, the 50 to 400 millimeter, and in that way we can shoot with two lenses covering everything from 13, 14 millimeter all the way through to 200 or to 400 millimeter. And yes, I do know the 12 to 24 millimeter lenses do exist. They just come with a few downsides that I would like to get rid of, such as size, weight, and especially the bulby front element, not to mention that they stop at 24 millimeter, which would leave somewhat of a gap up to where the super zooms start to be pretty good, because especially the Tamron 28 to 200 millimeter, which I have here, is quite weak from 28 to 35. So it would leave a gap from 24 to 35 millimeter. Yes, I know you can crop, but still. So Sony already has a really magnificent 16 to 35 millimeter f4 lens. It is small, it is lightweight, it is super tack sharp, but I often do find myself needing those extra 2, 3, optimally 4 extra millimeters in the wide end. Now Canon actually does have a 14 to 35 millimeter lens. Not jealous at all, but it does also come with some downsides. The corners does seem to be a little bit weak, and it is not the lightest of lenses. Nikon has a 14 to 30 millimeter, but they do compromise on those 30 to 35 millimeter, which I would prefer to have covered, both for making the individual lens more practical, but also so it covers the focal range that the Tamron 28 to 200 millimeter can't handle optimally. So a 13 to 35 millimeter, 14 to 40 millimeter, super zoom wide angle lens. And no, I haven't mentioned anything about aperture yet, but I'll get to that in a moment. For a lens with such an extreme focal range, yet still have good image quality, there's something that's gotta give. So it's important that we identify what we landscape photographers do need in a lens and what we do not need, where we can compromise on the engineering of the lens. So I'll start out by what we need in the lens, and then I will tell you what I think we can compromise on. And I really do hope the camera manufacturers see this video. So if you do know anybody at Sony, Sigma or Tamron, please share this video. Bomb them with this video. All right. So first and foremost, no bulby front elements. I hate them. I'm done with using 15 centimeter filters with custom-made filter holders. They are a pain to walk around with, not to mention that they also weigh a little bit. So no thank you, no bulby front element. I need to be able to screw on my magnetic filter holders. So 82 millimeter filter thread maximum, optimally 77 or below. Preferably, I also want the lens to be lightweight. I don't mind it being plasticky as long as it is lightweight and you control that weight. And that is especially important for us landscape photographers, because usually we do hike up on top of the mountain and every gram matters when it comes to that. And size-wise, well, if we can't make them as small as the 16 to 35 millimeter f4, then maybe something between the old 16 to 35 millimeter f2.8 and the f4 here. Like, as long as it's light, size is of less important. So where I do not want to compromise is on weather sealing. As landscape photographers, we can easily end up in rain and other circumstances where we really need that weather sealing. And since the cameras I'm shooting right now here on my A7R5 are already really good weather sealed, it would just be stupid not to have the lens weather sealed. So obviously, weather sealing is a must for a good practical landscape photography lens. Now, as most landscape photographers does not work with foreground or background blur, that we generally have everything in the photo in focus, it is extremely important that the lens is sharp from corner to corner throughout the entire focal range and throughout all apertures, especially from like f8 and down to, and hopefully through, f16, so that we can stop down the lens and get everything in focus, yet still have everything sharp. Another thing that's big on my wish list is a straight 5 or 6 bladed aperture. So if you have a 5 bladed aperture, you get like 10 spikes in the sunstar, and if you have 6, you actually only get 6 spikes. But if you look at a lens like the Tamron 10mm f2.8, it has a gorgeous sunstar. It was actually one of the biggest reasons why I wanted the 5 blade aperture version of this lens. Beautiful sunstar. And honestly, I find that most Sony wide-angle lenses have a little bit of a meh sunstar. So get some inspiration from that Lauva lens. That very spiky, thin, full of character sunstar is something I would love to see. And again, because we do not work with background blur or foreground blur and bokeh and whatever in landscape photography, I would prefer that we prioritize a beautiful sunstar over the most creamy out of focus areas of whatever scene we are photographing. And obviously also avoid all kinds of flaring throughout the lens. We do not want like disco colors and lights throughout our landscape scenes. It's annoying to work with. And absolutely also avoid those vignetting circles that I see in some of the super zooms from both Tamron and also Sony. Whenever I edit my photos, I add a lot of contrast, I add some dehaze and whatever, dependent on what aperture I'm photographing at, combined with what focal length, those big rings turn up and they look horrendous and they are super annoying to have to edit out. So avoid those two. Okay, so I know this was a big wish list and a lot to ask for a lens. So where can we compromise? And hear me out. I know when I say it, a lot of you photographers out there will be like, but no, we can compromise on the aperture. And I think that is the best place where we can win the most. Personally, when I do my landscape photography, I usually always stop down to at least f8. This means that I generally just go for my f4 lens. I don't even shoot at f4. I always stop it down. I do not need those f2.8. I do not need those crazy apertures. For my sake, I don't care. Let's start it at f5.6, 6.3, 7.1. I don't care. The most important thing is that we have edge-to-edge, corner-to-corner sharpness throughout the entire zoom range and throughout the apertures that we actually need. So yes, we don't technically need tack sharp photos wide open unless we start the lens at f8. But point being that we landscape photographers, cityscape photographers, and architecture photographers, we usually use a tripod even when we shoot wide angle. So I really do not see why we would need apertures that are wide open. Fact of the matter is, if we do astro landscape photography, we would just go for a fast wide angle prime anyway, like a 14mm f1.8. We really do not need those open apertures. And I think from an engineering perspective, that is where we could actually win the most. Heck, even make it a variable aperture throughout the zoom range. Again, I don't care. I just want it to be 13-35 or 14-40. Super practical, focal zoom range. And let's be honest with the next one here. All newer cameras have amazing in-body image stabilization. So if you insist on wanting to keep your camera in your hands and hold it to photograph, the in-body stabilization is so good that we do not need it in our lenses. I am regularly being surprised by how good my R5's in-body stabilization is. I can shoot at 200mm with my Tamron 28-200mm that does not have image stabilization in it, down to shutter speeds of like, let's say, 1/10 of a second. So I often actually do not need my tripod when using that lens. If it does help out the lens engineering process, we do not need an AF, MF, autofocus, manual focus button on the lens either. Again, I have to refer to my 28-200mm. It does not have an AF/MF button. I just change it within the camera. I usually use back button focusing. So whenever I have focused, it's the same as being in manual focus anyway. And if I really do need the manual focus in the rare occurrence where I need it, like let's say at night photography, what I wouldn't use this lens for anyway, then I can just change to manual focus in the camera. And if you want to know how I set up my Sony a7R5 with all the different custom settings, including back button focusing, check out the video up here in the corner. So I've referred to my Tamron 28-200mm a few times throughout this video, and now I'm specifically looking at you, Sony. Please, please, won't you update your super zoom full frame lens, the 24-240? Oh, it's not very, very good. It's really not that good. Please. Now it is super important that you like and share this video so we can spread it out and actually get this lens made. I have talked with both Sony and Sigma, and it's not really a lens that they have like conceptualized. So hopefully with this breakdown, it will help out to make them make the choice of actually designing this lens. If you want to learn how I compose the photos that I've shared throughout this video, be sure to get my 2 ebooks on composition. You can get them along with my ebook on light down in the description of the video. With minimal text, they're super easy to read and they have tons of examples so we get to the point fast. And if you want to know how I edit my photos, be sure to enroll in my big post-processing course, 30+ videos, 20+ hours of techniques, where I cover how I edit my photos, introduce you to the different programs, and have specific videos dedicated to the different techniques such as dodging and burning, how to clean your photos properly, how to work with atmosphere and glow, how to work with luminosity masks, how to blend with luminosity masks for super clean and sharp photos, how to sharpen your images, how to focus stack your images, and much more. There's a coupon code along with the link to my ebooks down in the description of the video. So I think that was everything for a 14-40 or 13-35mm. Have I forgotten anything super important for us landscape photographers? Is there anything where you do not want to compromise of what I've talked about here, let me know down in the comments. And check out this video if you want to learn even more about landscape photography.